kind of hoping for a Ben Johnson bounce back game because I haven't loved some things here as of late, and I know that's
Yeah.
tied to Goff playing, a little bit some spotty football. So I would love a Ben Johnson masterclass where the offense just puts up a nice, 35-point piece, and then the defense gets a few stops and, on to 10-3.
Personally, I don't think we're going to go into this game and see Jared Goff turn it over 3 times. So clearly Morgan and I were wrong about a couple things. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Pride Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Meko, and in today's video, we are unfortunately going to have to recap another Lions loss this past week as the Lions fell to the Chicago Bears 13-28. Now, this was definitely not what I had in mind when I thought the Lions would be able to start being able to catch some momentum coming off their win against the New Orleans Saints. And for the most part, the Lions have been able to pick up more wins after coming out of the bye. They did suffer that loss to the Green Bay Packers. But to pick up another NFC North division loss is not what any of us in the fan base were expecting, especially a loss to the Bears, who have been struggling for most of this year. And listen, we're going to get into the things that I think are probably some of the bigger issues to come out of this game. But I want to basically preface this by starting out saying I'm not panicking, right? I'm going to sound frustrated about certain things. And I think just like many of you, you have a right to be frustrated. I have a right to be frustrated with some of the things that we're seeing on the field. However, I got to emphasize that doesn't mean I'm jumping ship. That's not, you're not going to get me on here calling for people's jobs. I'm not going to call out for Aaron Glenn's job or Ben Johnson's job or start talking about how we need to bench Jared Goff. Those things aren't going to happen in this video. They just not. But I am going to hold people accountable because I think that's what we should do as a fan base, is to look and assess this team, and based off the standards that they have set up, hold them accountable to that style of play. And if guys are not, living up to those standards, if coaches aren't living up to those standards, we should be able to talk about that in this type of, structure. So I want to hear from you guys in the comment section of some of the things that you're either most frustrated about or things that you maybe are thinking, people are upset about these things, but it's not nearly as bad as it seems. I want to be able to hear both sides of this because, again, I do think there's a wide array of feelings to have about this team right now. I understand if you're frustrated, but I also understand for those of you that are still very optimistic because this team is still 9-4. There's still so many good things to be had from this season and from this team. So with that said, let's jump into the first thing that I'm obviously the most frustrated about, and that has to be the performance of Jared Goff and Ben Johnson. I want to kind of preface by keeping those two guys together because oftentimes whenever we're heaping praise on Jared Goff, or for a lot of people when they heap praise on Jared Goff, Ben Johnson isn't too far off in the sentence and getting a lot of credit for how he's performed. Well, in this game specifically, and a lot of the games where he struggled so far in the last 3 to 4 games, turnovers and just having slow starts have been a big part of Jared Goff's performance, but also this offense hasn't looked nearly as explosive as it did early in the season. To have a game where Jared Goff throws the ball 35 times and you get less than 300 yards, in my mind, is purely unacceptable. He threw it 35 times, but only had 20 completions. And of those 20 completions, he only was able to generate 161 yards. That's not the style of offense that we had grown accustomed to seeing under Ben Johnson. And it's not the style of football that we had grown accustomed to seeing Jared Goff. And I know that there is this stigma out there, or this, I don't even want to say if it's a stigma, because I do think there is some stats to go behind it, that Jared Goff struggles in outdoor games or that he struggles in cold weather games. That being what it is, Jared Goff had still found ways of playing good football on the road, outside, and even in some adverse, circumstances or in some adverse weather. This style of play that we're seeing from him, though, where he's not pushing the ball down the field, where he's, throwing a lot of passes short, specifically to running backs or tight ends, and not really stretching the defense, down the field, is not the style of football that, like I said, I'm accustomed to seeing from him. And it's not the style of offense that I think we as a fan base have grown accustomed to seeing Ben Johnson run. This was a team early in the year that was leading many teams in the NFL in terms of plays beyond 20 yards. Josh Reynolds was one of the most targeted wide receivers generating the most, not just targets, but also receptions on 20-yard plus plays. And since then, yesterday was the most that we have seen of Josh Reynolds, as he was able to bring in, I believe, 4 receptions. Prior to that, he was getting a reception here or there. And when we start talking about limited touches, we have to talk about Jameson Williams. What's the point of getting JMO back and having him from suspension, having him be healthy, having him picking up the offense if he's only going to get 1 touch and 2 targets in a game? Those types of things just don't make sense from a fan base standpoint. And I'm sure it does frustrate, the coaching staff to a certain extent. And I'm sure it frustrates the players to a certain extent. You have players that are fully capable offensively to have you dominating other teams in the NFL. There was a reason why last year this was a top 5 offense in the league. There was a reason why, again, in the beginning half of the season, this was one of the top offenses in the league. And so far, since the bye, outside of that Chargers game, it looks like this offense has just kind of not captured that same momentum or that same play style that they had early on. And that is something that does go to Ben Johnson, and specifically Ben Johnson, in terms of looking at the type of plays that he's calling. I don't know if he's overthinking some of these matchups. I don't know if it's simply a philosophy that Dan Campbell has that, like, hey, we just want to run the ball and find success with that and then pick our shots here and there. But when teams are basically, understanding that your quarterback isn't going to throw the ball beyond the first down marker, that he's not going to challenge them deep, I think you start to get more teams doing what the Chicago Bears did, as well as doing what the Green Bay Packers did, which is they're going to apply a lot of pressure on passing down situations and specifically lock up the middle of the field so that he can't go to targets like Amon-Ra St. Brown and Sam Laporta very often. Listen, when it comes to Jared Goff, I don't believe it's a secret or a mystery to be able to understand what he likes to do well and what he struggles with. And at this point in the season, there's a lot of tape on teams to be able to understand what they do well and what things they don't like to do. At this point, this is when the Lions have to start shaking stuff up. We hear about it all the time about how offenses and football teams have these elaborate playbooks, and there's tons of plays that they barely call because, for whatever reason, there's just not enough games or there's not enough snaps. And you want to have a core set of plays that you and your team are comfortable running. Well, at this point, it does at least seem like teams are starting to get more on the page of understanding what Jared Goff wants to do, how to get after this offensive line, and specifically how to probably even limit some of his, bigger targets in terms of Amon-Ra St. Brown. And I mean, again, Sam's 1 game removed from having his breakout game against the Saints, but it's not going to probably take them too long to understand how to start to limit him as well. If that's the case, Ben Johnson is going to have to go to the lab and start digging deeper into that playbook to pull out things that teams haven't seen. Pull out some plays that do utilize Jameson Williams in a wider array of things outside of just sending him 20 yards down the field. I see a lot of you saying some of the same things that I'm about to say, and I've probably said in the past. You want to see JMO on shallow, crossing routes. You want to see him on slants. You want to see him in the middle of the field doing things so that he can get the ball in his hands and then be able to utilize that speed. And when it comes to Josh Reynolds, I think even yesterday showed like he is still capable of making those tough contested catches down the field. Let's dial up more of those. Let's get more of these, bootleg action type plays, because the run game is working. Teams are still going to have to respect the run game, and they're going to have to respect Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. If that's the case, if you start getting those 8-man boxes, take shots down the field. Make them have to cover your wide receivers further down the field and utilize, again, the wide array of weapons that you have, whether it's Saint, whether it's JMO, Gibbs, Khalif Raymond, again, got a lot of targets yesterday, but again, Khalif's a great downfield target as well. Both Ben Johnson and Jared Goff have to get back to doing what was very successful with this offense. And that goes beyond just running the ball, because like I said, that's remained successful. Being able, though, to keep defenses honest and keep them off kilter and not being able to cue in on everything that you want to do is the best thing that this offense can do. And it's the only hope that I believe that they have of regaining the success that they had early in the season. Mix things up and make teams have to second guess. Don't allow them to just be able to cue in and keep their linebackers in the middle of the field. Make their linebackers have to honor these wide receivers and these tight ends and your running backs in every facet of the passing game. Because if they do that, then this offense can be the one unit that we know that we can rely on going into games. Because so far, that is still the strength of this team. This offensive line, your offensive coordinator, and the wide array of weapons that you have on the offensive side. And I think that would even help Jared Goff, again, being able to turn the corner on some of these turnovers and get back into a consistent rhythm where he can be able to survey the field and deliver the ball to his playmakers. Now, coming out of this game, one of the biggest things, and we just spent a lot of time talking about it, was the offense. The offense had its struggles. Ben Johnson had his struggles. Jared Goff had his struggles. Surprisingly, though, I thought the defense played really well coming out of this game. And I know that doesn't sound great when you consider the fact that they did give up 28 points, and 2 of those touchdowns came on clear blunders from the defense. But for the entirety of the game, well, let's not talk about the entirety of the game. Let's first look at the first half. I thought that defense was finally start to come alive. We saw the best game that we've seen from John Kaminsky all year. He finally started to look like the John Kaminsky of last year, where he was just, again, that chess piece that seemed to be able to move around the defensive line and really help this defense execute at a high level. Aiden got into the sack column again. Derek Barnes was making plays. Alexander Deloney was back in the mix. There were a lot of things to like about this defense in the first half. And the fact that Aleem McNeil wasn't there and this defense still found ways to be successful is a really good sign that they at least are playing better. They do need help from the offense, I think, to be able to sustain that play, because once they got into the second half and once the offense kept going 3 and out in that second half, that's when we started to see the defense slow down. That's when we saw it becoming more difficult for them to stay on top of the Chicago Bears and apply pressure throughout that game. And so when you have a defense that's on the field that much, eventually they're going to start to tire. They're going to start to wear down. And unfortunately, they're also going to start to force errors. Aiden Hutchinson, I think, had an okay game. But I think for him, he's probably going to look at it as probably one of his worst games, because the 2 mistakes that I mentioned earlier are directly on him. He jumped off sides on a 4th and 13 that allowed the Chicago Bears to take a just gamble on a deep shot to DJ Moore that turned into a touchdown that allowed the Chicago Bears to go up 20-13 in that situation, as well as the touchdown run that Justin Fields has. Aiden ended up saying after the game that he actually kind of went rogue on that one because he tried to stunt to have a better chance of getting to the quarterback, which kept him out of position to hold contain on Justin Fields and allow for an easy escape for the quarterback and run in for a touchdown. Those types of things, again, those are 2 plays, but those are 2 of the biggest plays of this game that basically put it out of reach. Now, I'm not going to come on here and kill Aiden for that, because for the majority of this season, he has been the one constant for this defense. He is the guy that's constantly, putting out effort. He's obviously at the top of the list, or one of the top players when it comes to quarterback pressures. He's trying to do his best to make a play. And I do chalk this up to just youth and making those, little mistakes that a young player is bound to make. And so while that may be true, the truth of the matter is you still can't afford to have those, especially when your offense is struggling. And this goes back to something that Dan Campbell has said almost from day one, that they have to be able to play complementary football. When one side of the football is struggling, the other side has to be able to alleviate that pressure. And so when the offense is struggling the way it was in this game, again, having a number of 3 and outs, having an interception, a fumble, another interception near the end of the game, which I don't know if I'm going to count, but it happened. Those types of things, like I've mentioned in the past, put your defense in a tougher situation because now they can't afford a mistake. And unfortunately, you got 2 of them. And I think those 2 mistakes combined with the deficiencies that we saw on the offensive end is what killed this team. Now, the third and final thing that I do want to talk about in regards to this Lions versus Bears game is the number of penalties that we saw against the Lions. And we're going to definitely talk about some of the penalties that didn't get called against the Lions. Listen, the penalties on the offensive line, I am for the most part am going to chalk up to it as an anomaly. We've seen this offensive line play very sound football. We don't see them get called for many holdings or false starts or things of that nature. We don't see them get called for a lot of delay of games. But unfortunately, the Lions did get hit with a few of those, and I do think that did contribute to the offense not being able to be on schedule. At the same time, it does kind of go back to the thing I was saying about Jared Goff, where I think the word is kind of out on him, where it's if you get this quarterback behind schedule and he's not able to operate in a form or fashion that he's comfortable with, you're not going to get a lot of creativity out of him. And once the Lions are in a 1st and 15 or they're in a 2nd and 12 or whatever the case may be, everything is off schedule and the Lions aren't able to run the style of offense that they want to. Now, we also have to talk about the 2 penalties that were called in this game that probably also affected this Lions team in a way. We had the delay of game at the end of the first quarter, which I can be frustrated with it being called, but at the same time, I am kind of frustrated with Jared Goff for not snapping the football. You got the defense to jump. The very least you can do is snap that football, and either they whistle it dead and you pick up your 5 yards and then you basically run another run play, or you snap the football and you actually take a deep shot. Like, it goes back to having a quarterback or having Jared Goff in that mindset to go for the free play and to take a shot when it's given to you. So before I even really get frustrated with the refs on this one, I'm first frustrated with my own team for not taking advantage of that opportunity. Still, I am a little irritated with the officials because we often hear about how there's not that much of a difference between the play clock and the game clock. And yet the Lions still get hit with this penalty. And I know some people may say, well, Meko, it technically was a penalty. There was a half second left on the game clock when the play clock ran out. And if that's the case, fine. But give the Lions a chance to run a play at that point, because essentially the clock should be dead after that penalty. So that's a little irritating. But like I said, biggest frustration lies with my own team with that penalty. When it comes to the intentional grounding that wasn't called, that's just dumb. I don't understand the explanation of that rule. And if you guys follow Jeremy on Twitter, he had a great snapshot of what the official rule says. That should have been intentional grounding. Yes, that one's even more frustrating because they got that one blatantly wrong. And obviously the result of them not calling that intentional grounding allowed the Bears to still line up for a 4th and 13, which then led to the offsides. I'm sorry, by Aiden Hutchinson, which then led to the touchdown. In one sense, I can understand people that are going to sit back and say, you know what, Aiden should hold his water better, or hey, don't play the game in such a way where officiating is going to impact you. And guess what? I would agree with both of those things. But it is also very, very frustrating when you see a rule being applied completely incorrectly. Did that one call lead to the Lions losing this game? No. Everything the Lions did after that play is what led to them losing the game. But still, with a fan base that has been, the whipping boy of the NFL officials so many times, it's just, again, it's a pain point for us to see stuff like that and the trickle down effect afterwards. So, with all that said, listen, as you guys can see, I'm frustrated with this team's loss. I think they should have played better. I don't think they came in nearly as prepared offensively to be able to match what the Chicago Bears defense was going to do to them. I don't think they applied enough pressure once they got that momentum in the second quarter. And I do primarily look at Ben Johnson and Jared Goff as the two people on this team that need to get their act together. Ben Johnson needs to become more aggressive in his play calling, and Jared Goff needs to get back into his rhythm of being able to execute and lead this offense effectively. But at the same time, I'm not panicking. The Lions still, like I said this when they lost to the Packers, and I will continue to say this, the Lions still have every opportunity in front of them. They still have, I believe, a 99% chance of getting to the playoffs. I think they have like an 89% chance or something like that to actually like host a playoff game. So the Lions are getting into the postseason. They do need to clean up their act, though, if they want to actually host a game and win this division. And that is something that they can fix this week when they play the Denver Broncos. And again, the Denver Broncos are surging, but the best way for this coaching staff and for this team to showcase that they're learning from their mistakes is to go out against a team that is surging, against a team that seems to have found their mojo, and nip it in the bud, right? And Morgan and I are going to come on here later this week and we're going to dissect the Denver Broncos and talk about what they do well and what they don't do well. But as of right now, one thing that I will always agree with Dan Campbell about, and I think he does a really good job of, is that he always looks internally as what's wrong with this team. Because I think so far through this second half of the season, since the Lions have come off of the bye, their issues aren't related to what other teams are doing to them. It's what they themselves are not doing, whether it's turnovers, whether it's penalties, whether it's not having the proper aggressiveness in the offensive side of the football, whatever the case may be. This is a Lions focused issue, and only they can fix it. And they'll have that perfect opportunity to do that this Saturday against the Denver Broncos. So that's going to do it for this video, guys. I hope you guys are able to finally woosah, get some of those negative feelings out, and let me know in the comment section how you're currently feeling and what's your outlook on the season going forward. Do you think the Lions are going to continue to struggle? Do you think that they're going to right the ship against the Denver Broncos this week? And essentially, what do you think is the biggest problem with this team right now? I want to hear from you guys in the comment section. Also, if you're looking for any more coverage on the Detroit Lions, be sure to head over to pridedetroit.com. We have new articles getting posted daily, numerous articles going up each and every day. Also, be sure to hit that subscribe button and hit that notification bell. That way you can be notified every time we upload new videos or go live over here on YouTube. But with all that said, I'm Meko. Thank you guys for taking the time to watch, and I'll catch you in the next one.